Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 28th, 2024 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Bartley, would you please take the roll?
I will. Just one moment, please. Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Boyd?
Here.
Commissioner Chapin? Commissioner Denault?
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks? Commissioner Lapine? Commissioner Overby?
Here.
Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Vice Chair Wagner?
Here.
Chair Sullivan?
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Wagner,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Denault. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Agenda approved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the July 24th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Overby,
Second.
seconded by Vice Chair Wagner. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Takes us on to item number 2, committee reports. I don't believe we have any updates here. Landon, do we?
I just mentioned that the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee met tonight, this evening, just before this meeting. Fairly brief meeting, basically an update from recent activities we've had involved in the Comprehensive Plan Update, which I will get into during my staff report.
Okay, thank you. Well, I turn it over to you to give your staff report then.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Well, for the Comprehensive Plan Update, as I mentioned, the Comprehensive Plan Update Coordinating Committee met this evening before this meeting. August was Climate Month for the Comprehensive Plan Update, and on Monday the 19th, we had author Danielle Aragoni come to the East Lansing Public Library. Ms. Aragoni is the author of Climate Resilience for an Aging Nation, which we felt was a good book and a timely topic. So we were very happy to have her come to the library and spoke to a good-sized crowd. I would say fairly well represented of older individuals. We have been encouraging a participation from our seniors, particularly those involved in prime time, and our Age-Friendly Communities Committee. Immediately after Ms. Aragoni's talk, we had a talk back from the Age-Friendly Communities group. That was also, I'd say, our most well-attended of the talkback session so far. It's a really good conversation about the discussion, the book that Ms. Aragoni talked about, the different sort of solutions that she was proposing for actions that a city can take. She spoke quite a bit about housing and different housing forms, and I'll talk about that in a moment. A couple days later, on the 21st, we had a community open house in Patriarch Park. In the evening, we had a couple of activities in the pavilion, but we also had our staff was walking around the park and talking with different folks who were hanging out in the park. And one very popular activity was the wishing tree, where we had participants write down a wish that they wanted to see the city of East Lansing, I guess, take action to address climate change and be more climate resilient. And so those tags were hung on a little tree by the pavilion. It was a popular activity, and we think we're going to do that again for our next activity. Next activities are in September is for Housing Month. The coordinating committee will be meeting on the 18th. On Tuesday, September 24th, in this room in the evening, and I want to encourage all planning commissioners to attend. We have a housing clinic that's going to be led by Ryan Kilpatrick of Flywheel Momentum. Flywheel is a housing-focused consulting group based in West Michigan. And what he's really going to focus on is different housing types, tools that are available to cities to bring around basically better housing policies given our current market trends and development pressures. So that'll be on September 24th. Tuesday, September 24th in the evening here at Hannah. I want to mention that on Wednesday, September 25th, we are scheduled to have a Planning Commission meeting that is going to be canceled. So you will not have any Planning Commission meetings in the month of September, which will give you all kinds of time to come to our comprehensive plan activities. So thank you in advance for doing that. On Monday, the 30th, we'll be hosting an open house about housing in downtown East Lansing on Ann Street Plaza. We're going to have live music. We're going to have some interactive activities. Just really hoping to get passersby feedback on housing in East Lansing and what kind of housing is needed, where it's needed, types of housing, and just really try to get a wide range of feedback from people in downtown. So that'll be on the 30th. And then as we get into October, we're going to start condensing, or bringing everything together, pulling everything together. On October 7th, we're going to have an event called Every Plan, Everywhere, All at Once, which will bring together all the different planning processes that are happening in the city right now in this room here at Hannah Community Center. That'll be on October 7th again. A few days later, on October 17th, we're going to have another speaker who's Dr. Xenia Coatvall from MSU Urban Planning Program. And she's going to talk about, hey, now we're at this point of sort of the community engagement process is starting to wrap up. And now we're getting into the writing a document and sort of finalizing the recommendations in this comprehensive plan update. And so she'll be helping us sort of guide us to the last part of the process. So we have a lot planned over the next couple months. I'll be informing you guys every step of the way, but just want to make sure I got a lot of details out right now because, as I mentioned, we don't have any meetings in the month of September. So September 18th for the committee meeting, 24th for the housing clinic right here in this room, 30th for our downtown open house. So any questions about anything I've mentioned tonight?
Questions from commissioners? For the September 30th event, is there a time set for that yet, or is it to be determined?
I think we're looking at 4 to 6:30, so in that range, sort of early evening, but it hasn't been finalized yet.
Great. Sounds like a good event.
It will be amazing. So, any other questions?
Good pitches for all of those. No, I don't have any questions. Does anybody else? Seeing none.
Just a quick one.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Williams.
The organization who's going to be at the meeting on September 24th?
The organization is Flywheel Momentum.
Flywheel Momentum. I couldn't write that fast enough.
Flywheel is the consultant.
You didn't have the momentum.
I guess not.
So, and that'll be Ryan Kilpatrick.
Ryan Kilpatrick. Thank you.
Mr. Rutledge, did you have anything else for your staff reports?
I think that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you much. Appreciate that. On to item number 4, commissioner announcements. Any announcements from commissioners? All right. Seeing none, that takes us on to our communications from citizens portions of tonight's agenda. I did not see any written communications in the agenda packet, so that takes us on to item 5.2, verbal communications from members of the audience. I do have a card up here from Barb Anderson, if you'd like to come up and address the commission.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to thank the city and especially the planning department for having all these events around the comprehensive plan. And I've been attending them and participating, and that's great public participation. I'm a resident of East Lansing. I'm an urban planner / landscape architect. And I thought this graphic was especially good about public health in East Lansing. And the 5 most frequent causes of death in Ingham County from 2017 to 2021 are listed. Have you seen this graphic? Okay, yeah. And you know, there's so many connections. Like, I'm a avid bicyclist and walker and public transit user, and all of those improve our health. And not just in physical ways, but in mental ways. You know, breaking down isolation. When I was a college student at Iowa State, one summer I drove a public bus. And, you know, it's just amazing, the community that develops among regular riders. And I'd know my people, and I'd know, where's Martha? Is she not going to work today? You know, you just develop this community that's really great. So it's not just physical health, but all kinds of things. And I just want to read a small quote on the virtues of adult bicycling. You know, there's a lot of training in the schools, well, probably not enough, but, there's some training in the schools for children, learn how to safely ride. But so many adults give it up, and you may have heard, the 5 types of cyclists, there's the strong and confident, and there's the mildly interested, and there's the not interested. No way am I going to get back on a bike. But, the environmental aspects, the health aspects, social, cultural, and even though I'm a planner and I know we should pay for parking, there's no parking fees if you take public transit or ride your bike or walk. But every time, you've probably heard this quote, it's attributed to H.G. Wells. Every time I see an adult on a bicycle, I no longer despair for the future of the human race. There's some dispute whether he really said that or wrote that, but it just talks about how, the most ordinary things we do can help us progress and give us a sense of hope, I think. So I just wanted to commend you for having these updates and for having this author speak. She was great. Good book. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. And please, if you have any comments on the process as it moves forward, please let Landon know. All right. Any other members of the public wish to come forward? Seeing none. Anyone online in the queue?
No one on the queue.
Great. That takes us, since we have no public hearings tonight, that takes us on to item number 7, unfinished business, 7.1, which is consideration of ordinance 1536, amendments to the zoning ordinance to incentivize certain building forms and materials by permitting additional building height or number of units, allow upper floor residential uses in certain business zone districts, and permit mass timber production or manufacturing in industrial zone districts. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. So, I won't get into, I guess, too much. I'd like to start with sort of updates from our previous conversation. As you know, the Mass Timber Planning Commission put together a Mass Timber Committee. It was meeting for the first part of the year and sent recommendations to you earlier this summer. At the last meeting, we discussed the proposed amendments in some detail, and there were some changes that were proposed since that meeting, partially from staff and partially from Planning Commission's comments. There was a discussion about making sure that the proposed definition of mass timber or mass timber building would be referring to the most current adopted version of the International Building Code rather than a 2021 version. There is a bonus point that was proposed for projects which earn both mass timber or net zero and a 30% of AMI affordable housing point. I'm happy to explain any of these points too if you'd like. But the 30% AMI affordable housing point may be somewhat difficult to hit, and so this is staff's suggestion to, I guess, extend that bonus point to projects that also, or projects that would meet the 60% AMI affordable point, or 30%. So both of those. And then there had been basically just a mistake in how we, as staff, wrote down the different zone districts. The proposed incentive structure, I guess, would allow an additional story, potentially up to one additional story in the less intense districts, specifically RM54, B1, or B4. We had originally written B2, which is a little bit more intense of a zone district. So in the B2 and the B5 zone districts, which are a little more intense business districts, we would, under this incentive framework, we'd allow 2 additional stories, not just 1. And then the B3 and East Village would allow up to as many as you can get. Along those lines, there's one more change that I wanted to bring up. The framework as proposed allows sort of a maximum of 6 points, but only if you can only get points from one of the green building sort of categories, being mass timber, which currently is proposed to give you 3 points if you propose a mass timber building, net zero certified, or LEED or gold or platinum. If without specifying that you should only get points from one of those, you could potentially have somebody who, while it might be a very good thing, and I guess I'd be interested in the Planning Commission's thoughts on this, if somebody were to propose a mass timber building that would also be LEED certified and also be net zero certified, then they could be looking at 6 points just there, which could then, if they also had affordable housing, add on additional points, which in the B3 or EV district, I guess, would then translate into potentially 9 points. So I guess if the Planning Commission is open to allowing that sort of double dipping or triple dipping on different categories, I'd like to discuss that, but it might have some implications for how many stories you could add, particularly in the B3 or EV zone districts. So the only other thing that's happened since our last meeting and our last discussion about this was that the Downtown Development Authority reviewed this proposal at their meeting on August 22nd, and at that meeting voted unanimously to recommend approval by council, and also encouraging the Planning Commission to recommend approval by council. So if the Planning Commission votes this evening to make a recommendation to council, council would then schedule its own public hearing, which would likely take place on October 1st. With that, I think I caught us up to date, but I'd love to answer any questions if there are any.
Quick question.
Yes.
So which other committees or commissions have reviewed this? You said the DDA's reviewed it.
The DDA, the Commission on Environment, I don't believe other commissions have yet reviewed this.
Did they propose any changes, or did they just approve it as is?
My understanding from the Commission on Environment was just, this looks good. We have a member here, okay, who just spoke with you, and she's given me the thumbs up, so I don't think that they had any comments.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners? I know we talked about this at length at the last meeting, but
Commissioner Williams, I feel like you have something you want to say.
something good, I could tell. Yeah.
I was just looking at the materials, and when I went through them, on the point that you were just making about points within categories. Maybe I just need you to go through that again. As I was reading it, I read it as you could get a point for gold lead or platinum lead. You couldn't get both, but it wasn't clear about whether or not you could get net zero, mass timber, and lead, and get all. So I heard what you said, but as it's currently drafted, which way is it? The way you were considering it, or the way I read it?
As is currently shown, you could claim points under all of those categories, under the green building categories, any and all of them, as is currently written.
Okay.
I guess my suggestion would be if that's not what you want, we would probably want to recommend a motion or recommend a change to say, like, perhaps make the category green building, and then just clarify that you can only gain points under one part of that category. Or if you feel that it would be, you'd want to encourage multiple certifications and, get the greenest building you can.
Yeah,
Great,
I was
but we
confused
should-
by that as I went through it.
I'm
but
sorry?
I'm not sure what I think about it. I was confused about it as I went through it, and I was glad that you brought it up, because as I'm reading this on page 7, and it's got one asterisk, it says points are not cumulative within the same category, but then it says, for example, one cannot claim platinum LEED certification and also claim gold LEED certification. So then it has category, LEED is a category, net zero is a category, mass timber is a category, and affordable housing is a category. So the example just talks about the gold LEED or platinum LEED, doesn't really talk about net zero or mass timber. So I thought it was a little confusing internally.
And so the output from the committee had been that is one category, LEED. And so it's gold or platinum, not both. Because also platinum sort of includes gold. It's a point system,
Yes,
so if you
yes,
have
I'm
100
familiar
points
with that, yep.
or certain numbers, and you exceed that, then you might get platinum. So every platinum LEED project is essentially also a gold.
Correct.
But I don't think that it was an outcome from the committee discussions that, could somebody be hitting all of these categories? So I just want to be
All right, thank
clear
you.
with that.
I had a question too about, there was a reference in your report about how moving forward in this direction would align East Lansing with comparable municipalities, and I'm wondering which specific ones you were looking at.
I guess the section that I'm talking about for what would be aligning East Lansing would be to allow upper story residential uses in business districts. Cities that come to mind immediately in Michigan that allow upper story residential are Grand Rapids, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Traverse City, Lansing. I could probably name several more, but it's fairly common in zoning codes to allow upper story residential uses in a mixed-use business district.
So you weren't really referring to the incentive program as
No.
being the alignment? Okay, that
Yeah.
clarifies.
The alignment is really more about that upper story residential.
Got it. And then there's also a reference about how we could accomplish some of the objectives laid out here with little to no additional parking needed.
Yes.
Parking's always a big concern. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Absolutely. So that's also about the proposal to allow upper story residential in business districts. Generally, residential uses require parking in the evenings and overnight. Generally, office uses require parking or have a parking need during the day. So you can have, office uses, or I guess non-retail generally, or non-restaurant commercial uses, because restaurant typically has evening uses. You have your daytime business uses that are going to be used in the parking lot at other times than residential uses will generally not use that same parking. So you have a good opportunity to share those uses in one building because you won't have the parking need for all the land uses at the same time. So because of that, they tend to be more compatible land uses where you can mix those uses in the building and without the same kind of parking strain that you might if you had, say, I guess just non-mixed use buildings. If you have all office, you're going to have a significant parking strain during the day and no parking need at night. So by combining these uses, you can essentially have more use of the property with less parking need. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, just seemed like kind of a global, parking's not a problem, kind of a conclusion, and I thought, well, that's great.
Maybe I was wearing
I'm glad to
rose-colored
hear that.
glasses when I wrote this, but
Yeah.
but generally, when you mix uses of residential and office, it results in less parking strain than mixing other uses.
Okay.
Can I push back on that slightly, though? I wonder, though, if with our encouragement to use non-motorized forms of transportation, especially in the downtown core, are we actually going to see a need for are we going to see what the sort of like teeter-totter, right, of parking, right? Residents park at night, businesses need that parking during the day. Are we not going to maybe see that as much as we assume that we will, given that we're encouraging people to bike or walk?
Yes, I think that there is that impact. I think it's somewhat limited here because I think automobile use is somewhat pervasive. We do have a higher proportion of transit use among students than many than other communities because of the student use of transit. So I think that if you're not using sort of transit or bicycles, yeah, you'll have more car storage.
Yeah.
We're not going to be moving your car out during the day. The mode share, I think, of non-autos is low enough right now that we probably wouldn't see that impact for some time. I think that it's certainly a possibility. I'm not worried about it.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Williams? No.
Never
The last ones were
apologize.
good. See, I said
Yeah.
they were going to be good, and they were.
I guess I'm coming to the end of my time here, so I've been around the block a couple times on an affordable housing proposal that didn't quite work out, or even a senior citizen kind of proposal that didn't quite pan out even after it was built. And so one of the things I don't see here is any sort of a penalty. Or was there any conversation about, the building gets built, like we've got that apartment building on the corner of Abbott and Grand River. extra height was given in exchange for Building C, which was an affordable housing building, which is still not built. We're sitting there with that empty lot, no affordable housing, life goes on. We had the senior citizen housing there, I don't remember what it's called, is it Newman Lofts that looks out over Albert? Bunch of consternation a few years afterwards about how students were living there, it wasn't a 55-plus sort of exclusive sort of arrangement anymore, or what's going on with the way the building is being managed after the incentives given, after the building's built. Is there any consideration given to what do you do about that? When developers get what they want, they get the incentive, the community gets what it wants, at least it thinks it does, and then it doesn't happen. Is there any sort of a opportunity to build in a penalty? Does that ever happen anywhere? I'm still bothered by the fact that Building C never got built, because I was part of this commission. We voted for that building height as an incentive, and we waited and waited and waited, and it never happened, and it's not going to happen. So what do you think?
So this is an issue. I mean, in general, you always want to make people build the thing that you're the priority item first, so that you don't end up having a situation like this happen. The nice part, at least, about several of these points are that they are involved in the construction. So you build a mass timber building or you don't. And if it's not mass timber, I mean,
Yeah, I'm not worried
it's-
about the mass
so
timber
that part
part.
is
Yeah.
fine. The affordability, I think, would be a deed restriction, essentially. You have to price it at this for 20 years. And I mean, there's an administrative burden, I guess, as far as tracking that and making sure that they actually do. If we found that those units were not being priced as they were promised to be, we could theoretically revoke the land use rights.
Is that it? Can anything be put in the ordinance?
Sure.
I don't know
mean,
the answer to the question I'm asking. I don't know. It's a concern I have, and is there anything that can be put in terms of a penalty other than that?
I mean, so conditions of approval of a special use, and revoking those are a pretty big
Yeah.
move, but also a zoning violation is a misdemeanor. So that usually
Alright.
wakes people up and
That's helpful.
helps with compliance.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
All right, I have one more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm enjoying this.
Are you? Sorry. My last question is, I guess I'm stuck on the value judgment that gets made behind the points being assigned. Like, I don't have the expertise to know why Lead Platinum gets a 2 and Mass Timber gets a 3, or why the affordable housing option at 50% residential units at 60% area median income gets a 1 compared to Mass Timber. I get that this was a Mass Timber subcommittee. I get that it was populated with people who are advocates for Mass Timber, but I guess I'll just repeat my concern from the last time we talked about this. I think this is great work. I mean, it's really good work. It's moved this issue way down the road from where it's been kind of languishing for quite some time. So I think that's really great. But if you were going to create a subcommittee to talk about building incentives in the city of East Lansing, I think there might have been some voices for affordable housing around the table, and there weren't. And so I wonder, is that reflected in the points that are given for the variety of issues that we're trying to incentivize? Yeah. And I guess it's just a concern. It's a concern I don't think you can answer. Maybe you can chime in a little bit about how these relative values were assigned or discussed by the committee, but it just kind of bothers me.
I think my chiming would just be that there was a lot of discussion and a lot of really good discussion about how do we assign these values, and they're a value judgment at the end of the day. I think that, like you said, is a Mass Timber Committee, and I think that there was a lot of recognition about the upfront costs that are associated with mass timber construction, especially right now. Whether or not the other points should be adjusted that's a hard one to answer and hard one to advise on.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that. We do have 3 committee members here that might be interested in speaking if you'd like to ask them, but
Yeah, I would.
I don't want to put them on the spot too much.
But just a dialogue.
I noticed that the big group is not here tonight. So, yeah, I'd love to hear some more thoughts on that.
So, yep, please, if the applicant
Are we
would
willing?
come forward and address this group and take any potential questions.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is George Berghorn. I'm a faculty member in construction management at Michigan State University, and I'm the research director for the Mass Timber at MSU program. Again, like Landon, I mean, I think this is like a river that has some alligators in it to now try to untangle hours and hours and hours of conversation, other than to say that there was, I feel like as a member of that committee, there was good deliberation around the table. I think where on the mass timber thing, where the issue kept coming back with the points for mass timber was getting LEED Platinum. I want to make sure I'm saying this the right way. Getting LEED Platinum is sort of a means to an end of itself. 20 years ago, we would have been in this room talking about how pushing buildings toward LEED would create new subsectors of industries or new industries around it. In 2024, LEED Silver, LEED Gold is a pretty standard thing in the industry now, and LEED Platinum is a notch above that. But I think the economic development argument and the need to incentivize some of that argument, that's a 20-year-old argument to some degree. And I can say that with a great deal of certainty. I've been at MSU for 20 years, and I was involved in one of the first general contractor studies of LEED when it was LEED version 2.2, and those were the conversations we were having around the table on that campus 21, 22 years ago. I think the mass timber piece is unique in that there's a lot of interest in developing an industry around mass timber in the state of Michigan. We've got a very heavy forest products industry reliant state in Michigan. Depending on how you count up the dollars, we're the number 2 manufacturing industry, or not we, but forest products is the number 2 manufacturing industry in the state of Michigan behind automotive and all of its related subsectors. But that forest products industry is not the same, again, in 2024 as it was 10 or 20 years ago. One of the great concerns in Michigan and South Carolina and other states has been, particularly as pulp and paper mills have been going away, there's a real concern for what do you do with some of the wood that was being provided to those mills? Are lands losing value as forest lands because the economic uptake for those materials is all of a sudden no longer there? We've seen this in Michigan, lower value tree species that can't be turned into magazine paper because we're just not making magazine paper the way we used to in the state. So there's a coalition of folks around the state, DNR, Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development, universities around the state that are looking at this industry very broadly. And so mass timber becomes one strategy in this much broader discussion about how do we sort of modernize a forest products industry in the state of Michigan as well as regionally. So it's a long-winded way, and I apologize. I mentioned I'm a professor. I've been told I get paid by the word, so I apologize. But it's a long-winded way to say that those 3 points have some real significant economic development impact behind them that a LEED Gold building probably doesn't in 2024. I'm not even going to stand here and pretend to say that I'm going to argue about 60% AMI and the points for that versus mass timber, other than to say that one of our thoughts on the committee is that we've seen a lot of growth nationally with mass timber buildings in affordable housing. There's a lot of attributes of mass timber construction that lend themselves well to affordable housing construction development projects. So I think linking those 2 things together, or creating the opportunity to have the link between those 2 things in the table that you were referencing before, was something that was important to us. We can argue the appropriateness of the points, but I think, again, the broader point was We wanted to make sure those things were there and linked together. And at the same time, recognize that mass timber is still a nascent, relatively nascent industry within the United States, certainly within the Midwest. We are at a bit of a tipping point right now where the Midwest can really assert a leadership position kind of in a second wave of mass timber within the United States. The Pacific Northwest kind of got out first, and now it's sort of like who's going to come in as the big powerhouse behind them. And we're very well positioned in the Midwest, and Michigan is particularly well positioned within the Midwest to be in that position. The problem is, again, the technology is emerging, builders aren't familiar with it yet, and so some of those cost benefits and time benefits with construction have not always been understood or realized. And so getting that little extra push with the points is important. And we know it's important because we've convened an a Great Lakes wide mass timber supply and demand study. So that's being led out of MSU and our Department of Forestry with one of our forest economists. And one of the things we're finding is that the manufacturers are waiting for the demand signals, right? The supply side is waiting for the demand signals. They don't want to start relocating into an area to put a factory in place to manufacture this material until they start seeing stronger and stronger demand signals. So we really believe that that incentive structure, those incentive points, play a role in providing those signals. And we've been in conversation with some firms that are potentially interested in locating a manufacturing facility in the state, but we're still trying to find that balance between what does the building demand look like in Michigan to then attract that business development, that supply side into the state. So I hope that answered.
It's very interesting to me, and I like that your discussion about linking the affordable housing and the mass timber together. I wondered about that. I think that's really interesting. And it's interesting you're speaking about demand for mass timber and kind of don't really know that yet, but we do know there's demand for affordable housing.
Correct.
And a lack of supply.
Correct.
And I found your comment about gold lead, it's kind of like already sort of in the past, right? But yet it's given 1 point, as is the 60% AMI. But yet the demand is so strong and the need is so strong and the supply is so few. You know, I guess if I can summarize my feeling on the subject, I'd really like to get to a point where somebody who worked for the city or taught children in the city or was a police officer in the city could find affordable housing in the city. And I think we have a long way to go. So I guess I'm just concerned about the point structure. I think the work is really great. I'm really interested in the whole mass timber concept. I think you guys have represented your industry well and your work on this really well. I just have concerns about the relative value point system.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Berghorn's comments reminded me that he was saying essentially that there really aren't that many incentives anywhere for construction such as this, but there are incentives, a significant number of incentives, particularly at the federal and state levels, for affordable housing. So the need for additional local incentives is somewhat limited because it's incentivized through other means. That said, I mean, so this sort of speaks to it, and I think says, hey, we still want affordability. It's not as powerful of an incentive for sure as the other parts. I think that's a reflection of the committee, but also a reflection that there are other incentives available elsewhere. And almost,
Get them built.
I'm sorry?
Even when they want height and we give it to them, we still can't get them built, even with those other incentives. So there's an impediment there somewhere that we're not getting our arms around. I don't really know what the answer is, but.
I'd also just suggest that the points can be changed. I mean, and the points can be, I think that if you were to make a recommendation to council that would change the points, I mean, that would certainly be within your rights. So.
See, we're deviating pretty close into discussion territory too.
Oh,
so.
sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. All good comments.
All
so,
part of the report.
is there any additional questions for the applicant? Before we.
The applicant is us.
What?
I mean, the applicant is the city. Just to make clear,
Yeah.
they're not applicants, but
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they're You're
Okay.
on behalf of the applicant, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Who is the city? Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Is there a motion then?
I
Commissioner
actually just
Denault?
had one,
Yeah.
one question of clarification. So the points can be used for additional stories of height. Are those still those subject to our approval on the planning commission? Those additional height?
As proposed, no.
Okay.
The additional height would be essentially included as a prerequisite, essentially. Everything else might be still subject to the review and approval of the commission and/or council, the land use, for example. But the intent of saying this would be approved by staff is to give some certainty, or at least the building design, going into the permitting process or into the approvals process.
So we don't have sort of oversight over that, but council will?
No,
Oh, okay. Okay.
neither would. But the other parts of the
Okay.
building might be subject to that, but the height.
Okay. I think I was just confused because that's what I had recalled, right? The sort of incentive being that developers don't need to go through the additional bureaucratic processes of getting those additional heights. But yet I see the language that's being used is saying it's 4 to 6 stories approvable, right? Who is doing the approving then? Is it just staff?
Staff.
Okay.
Approving those elements.
Okay.
Not others. So
Right.
it's very unlikely that a project, a mass timber building with affordable housing, still wouldn't come to the planning commission or council. Very unlikely. I don't think possible. So you'd still be reviewing parts of it, but there would be certain parts that under this incentive program would be sort of off limits. Hey, we're not talking about the height now. We're just going to talk about land use, if that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
to further clarify, essentially you're saying that we would review almost always the application itself of what the proposal is going to be, but these standards would allow them to build up to the height that they're permitted for the table and the ordinance language.
It's intended to give the developer some certainty over certain aspects of the process that aren't there right now.
Engineering.
Got it. Good question.
That's true.
Is there a motion in order so we can discuss this? Let's see what page that's on. Landon, do you know what page the motion's on? So we
I
can-
don't have a sample motion, honestly. It would just be a move to recommend approval or denial by council with any following changes, if there are.
Understood, thank you. Is there a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Moved by Commissioner Denault.
Oh, do you want me to go ahead and make the full motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Make a motion.
Um,
Wait a second. Yeah.
I move that the commission recommend adoption of the mass timber proposal in front of us to the city council.
Specifically ordinance 1536.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. Okay, moved by Commissioner Denault, seconded by Commissioner Overby. Discussion. So we've had some good discussion already. I have some comments, but I'll wait until the rest of the commission weighs in. Not everybody rush at once. We got all the good discussion out of the way. Commissioner
I
Overby?
do have a comment. I mean, much of what we were discussing, to me, was building, getting the building in place and how it can be managed. And entirely separate from that is the use of something like affordable housing, and how is it going to be used? And it's not clear to me that the link between our approval for one and trying to encourage another, and I'm not sure that they're even linked at all. And once the developer builds a building and puts time and effort and money into it, I assume they're pretty much going to determine what it's used for based on the zoning requirements that are already in place. So I'm struggling with what I see as a tension between those two things, what we'd like to have as far as is housing and building, and then what this is going to accomplish for us.
Just
You know,
a-
I think maybe I would.
Commissioner Denault?
I think maybe I would point back to the discussions that we just had at the master plan committee meeting, though. I think there's a role for, I think I agree with the commissioner, with Commissioner Overby, but I think there's a role for the city to play in encouraging affordable housing and holding developers accountable to offer affordable housing. I think I would be very uncomfortable to say, well, the developer has invested the money to build the building and they can do what they want with it now. I think there is definitely a role for the city to say, no, you said that this would be affordable housing, and it will be. We expect that it will be.
Yeah. All right, I'll just say my comments, get them out of the way, and maybe that'll lead to more discussion. So first off, thanks for revising the definition of mass timber building to reflect the most current version of the building. I think that was a good fix just to mitigate a need to change that, should that be a revised document down the line. I think there was a tremendous amount of work that was put into this project through the committee. I like the concept. I particularly like that it's the carrot approach to get to what you were saying, Chuck, where this kind of outlines things that the city has prioritized as far as buildings are concerned. So an environmentally friendly and conscious building, mass timber is an innovative building strategy that has economic benefits for the region and the state, and then affordable housing. I think as far as like the accumulation and stacking of those points, I think, wow, what a benefit if the city were to have a building that had all three of those things built. Like, that would be a tremendous asset to the community, and I think that would be great. And I think we could debate the merits of where all the points goes in, and I think that's a very valid discussion. I'm glad that the framework exists, that can be altered down the line if need be. I think, to Landon's point, the people that were at the table certainly had an interest in the mass timber focus for those points and how those points were allocated. I just don't know enough about that overall point structure to question the work that committee did. And if housing affordability advocates were to come forward and advocate for something similar, I'd be very receptive to it. That's an issue I'm very, very passionate about. But ultimately, I'm glad that the framework exists, and I think that these are priorities that show good goals for the city, and I like that. And as far as the penalties are concerned that Commissioner Williams brought up, I think that's a very valid issue. I know we were both on the commission at the same time that whole Building C issue happened, and I'm also very frustrated by that. I don't know that that's part of this proposal necessarily, but if something like that were to come along to enhance the city's ability to do that, I certainly would be very receptive to that as well, although I don't know, I'm ready to have the discussion about that specific topic tonight, but I'm glad that you brought it up because I feel very similar. So that's where I'm at on this. I think it's an exciting prospect, and I'm glad that the committee took this issue up. So any other comments or questions? Commissioner Denault?
I think I really sympathize with Commissioner Williams as well, in the question sort of about how much weight and value we put on green building versus affordable housing, because I think they are both very important, and we seem to, as she said, have trouble getting affordable housing built in this city, which is enormously frustrating. I think one of the things that I do find very valuable, though, in incentivizing green building techniques is sort of thinking about the larger impacts that those buildings, positive impacts that those buildings might have for the community. So thinking about the sort of way that a LEED building is scored, right? It's scored on how it manages wastewater, how it manages rainwater, which we know is a big problem in this city, or thinking about a net zero building, right? A building that's being more mindful of the sort of emissions that it puts out into the community, how it's dealing with its sort of like waste resources. I wonder if there's a sort of, I'm not saying that it's as important or has as positive of an impact as affordable housing, but thinking about the ways that these buildings are sort of having overall positive impacts on the livability of our communities, and sort of incentivizing that and getting developers to understand that this is also important to us. It might be, I don't know if it makes it worth it, but it makes me feel slightly less uneasy about it, approving the point structure as it stands.
Yeah, I think some of you have heard me talk about the form-based code committee from several years ago. We spent a couple years drafting it. One of the goals was to streamline the approval process. As part of what we did, we also looked at the incentive structure, which currently only deals with affordable housing, and we actually did include in that draft green building incentives that wasn't as detailed as this. We didn't have access to the expertise that's been a part of this committee, but we did combine those two things somewhat differently, but we didn't have the focus that this committee has. So, while I have some reservations about the relative values on this, they don't rise to the level of making me not support this proposal. I do support it, and I'd like to see it move forward to council and have more robust conversation about the relative values and how to move forward with both of these, because they both have value. So I don't oppose it. I do support it.
Yeah, I wish there was a way that we could ask council to take special attention towards, right, how do we encourage or provide more incentives for the affordable housing piece?
I certainly think city staff can pass along our comments here during the council meeting and let them know that that was a particular point of focus. At least I'm encouraging them to do so if and when this proposal is referred, or it will be referred regardless, but referred with a recommendation. Any other discussion on this? Okay. All right, I believe a roll call vote's in order.
So we have a motion to recommend approval made by Denault, seconded by Overby. Commissioner Boyd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Denault?
Yes.
Commissioner Overby?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Vice Chair Wagner?
Yes.
Chair Sullivan?
Yes.
You guys have it.
All right. My apologies for making you do a roll call vote.
I love it.
Since we have, thank you for your work and commitment on this. So appreciate you. That takes us on to item number 9. Since we have no new business, is there any commissioner concerns? Now is the time to Commissioner Williams.
This isn't really a concern, so maybe it's more of a point of personal privilege. It was a heck of a storm.
Yeah.
And city staff did a heck of a job. I had a huge tree 2 doors down from me blocking the road, and within an hour of the storm stopping, city staff was out there clearing that road, and so bravo to them. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
We'll certainly pass it on to
Thank you.
to Public Works. They
Thank
did a
you.
yeoman's job.
Well, yeah.
Much
likewise,
appreciated.
Glen Cairn was particularly impacted, and I think it was, I'm sure the whole city was, but I think it was worse than the tornado we had a year or so
bad.
ago. Like, there was trees down everywhere. It was very interesting drive home from work that
Yeah.
day. So
Yeah.
yeah, I second your comments.
It was interesting to bike here.
Oh, I
Yeah,
bet.
look out for those twigs, right? Any?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Mr. Bartley.
I meant to mention one more thing in my staff report.
Okay,
if you don't
go
mind. We had a recent discussion between some members of the Planning Commission, some members of the Council or Commission on Environment, and staff about the tree removal process, or when you've had some recent requests to remove a tree that didn't necessarily meet certain guidelines for staff to approve the removal. There was a question of whether or not the Planning Commission is the right body to review those requests. From the discussion, a few other sort of questions came up. Specifically, there's another essentially a appeals process for city engineers' staff decisions that goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals for soil erosion and sedimentation control permits. Not sure if the Zoning Board of Appeals is the right body for those too. And then there was some discussion about, are the penalties for illegal tree removal enough? Should those be reconsidered? Are landscaping requirements of the zoning ordinance enough? And also the Commission on Environment has a lot of interest in doing a green infrastructure audit. So I guess all that said, I think the outcome of the meeting was, well, we have some more items that we might want to consider changing about these codes than just this specific question. What I'd like to do is, but I think that to look at that, it's going to take more than a meeting, so might be worth another committee. What I'd like to do for your next meeting, which will be October 9th, because we won't have September meetings, is bring forward a list of potential amendments, number one, that we might be bringing forward anyway, some clarification and corrections, but also some potential amendments to look at for a committee and sort of the scope of consideration that committee might take, and ask if the Planning Commission wants to form a committee. So look for that at your October meeting. Just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
And that's all.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that too, so appreciate you bringing it up. Any other commissioner concerns? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Overby. Seconded by Commissioner Boyd. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned at 7:59. We did it, guys.